Hello, my friends. Welcome back. I am Jennifer. If you're new to the channel, check us out. We sell some fine quality supplements by some of the best manufacturers at betterbytheday.info. Let me get that out of the way immediately. This isn't going to be the planned video that I've been working on for over a week. Basically have scripted right from my heart as I was going along. It was in the editing process, and so many things have come up since then. I just seriously feel the need to discuss what's more pressing, and really wanted to kind of decompress and not be quite as emotional as I've been feeling over things before Trump's shooting over the weekend. I'm still a little numb from all that, and I've heard all the reports coming in. I've watched it over and over again. The iconic picture that's got to be on the way to the Smithsonian, as well as should get a Pulitzer Prize. Absolutely, his walking into the RNC, the emotion and seeing the bandage on his ear. I am emotional. My husband's a guy. Guys have feelings, I get that, but they tend to look at things from a more logical perspective. I think women are more balanced in that. But, I mean, he was at a point of tears watching it unfold. And as it was, I had already been going through really now personally up close feeling the effects of the insanity that's going on with the country, what's acceptable. And I really I started thinking, oh my God, I've become my mother. I almost wanted to say the word, well, back in my day, there's some truth to that. Back in my day, things that have transpired over the past 3 weeks to a month wouldn't have been possible. The video, which I will do later, was more deconstruction seems to be the popular word for it now, in terms of cults and even some real fundamentalist Christianity, legalistic, and some changes and some questions that I now have addressed and I'm going to talk about. I would not call it a deconstruction. It's more like a reconstruction in some views of Christianity. One of my first videos was a little short about Girl Defined, and it was basically like, I hadn't watched them that much, but what I did see, they were just kind of encouraging, being a virgin before you are married. And my reaction as a Christian was, what is so terrible about that? I have 2 sons. I have a Gen Z and a millennial. And if I had a daughter, which I think I'm about to get one soon enough, I would encourage that. I would be very realistic about it in today's day and age. But what was wrong with that? And I started listening to Mickey Atkins, I believe. I'm going to leave one of her videos down at the end of this. And I remember being really, Mickey, at first, and I feel you now, girl, I'm a subscriber, very offended. It just looked like she was picking on Bethany. And her sister's so bad. And, it was obviously, in my opinion, triggering some personal issues within her. I don't know her beginning story, but it appears, oh, Mickey, if you ever see this, it's doubtful, but if you ever see this, it appears to me like you've been through this process and maybe have been hurt and affected by legalistic or fundamental Christianity and the abuses, and I am going to use that word, abuses, that women truly do go through, if not in ideology, just in actual behaviors and roles that were assigned in the church, the traditional roles. And I've always been too terrified to talk about it because, as a evangelical Christian, I guess that's how you could define it. I was raised Catholic. I'm going to get into the story now a little bit. I was raised Catholic. And I remember, before I ever went to church, I remember something, a protective light, love source. You know, I had a very abusive childhood, very, very young. I was physically harmed. And I remember being just laid in the crib. And that was the worst part, worse than actually being physically hurt. It was the aftermath. I wanted somebody to come in and comfort me. And that wouldn't happen sometimes for, well, technically never happened, but it could be hours before I was removed from the crib and reassured a little bit. But I remember what I will to this day call the presence of Christ, angels watching over me, dancing, you know. And I've done a lot of therapeutic work at deciphering what is a real memory, what is a false memory, and what is a repressed memory. So I know what my real memories are. I have some questionable ones, you know, that I do need to dig into a little bit more. But anyway, my first experience being taken to the church was actually very frightening. I was little, and at that point, you know, it was this big stone, beautiful, beautiful church, you know, with the windows and the arches and the, I mean, little, very frightening looking statues. And one of the first things I noticed is we had no access to the priests, especially children. You know, the nuns taught catechism, or it was a woman in a separate building. We literally had nothing to do with the priests, not even acknowledged. I didn't even see a lot of interaction before or after Mass. It was more, you know, families that would invite, bigger families usually, that would invite him over for dinner and to spend family time. And I guess that happened frequently with some of our neighbors, but I don't believe he was ever invited to our house. But in any event, you know, if you know anything about the sacraments in the Catholic Church, the first one is First Holy Communion. Well, you get baptized at birth, but then at 8 years old, you get your First Holy Communion, you know, which I remember being really excited about. My mother made a big deal of it. The white dress and the hair and, you know, the whole aesthetic thing that went with it. But the actual reality of it was truly frightening. And it's only recently that I realized I was already starting at a deficit. I was kind of a hopeless, helpless, rotten sinner by virtue of my birth. That was it. The original sin. And I don't know about y'all, and I'm sure I had done some stuff, but at 8 years old, I truly, truly, truly could not remember any sins. I just couldn't. And, you know, you go into this box and you're really not even allowed to see the priest. There's a little sliding window that they open up. And you have to automatically ask for forgiveness before you even confess your sins. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. This is my first communion. I remember those words. And I had already, you know, been sitting outside. There was a few girls ahead of me trying to think of what I was going to actually say, you know, and I just couldn't. And I remember, I'm not saying I never sinned, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just saying I really couldn't think of what to say to this man. And I was scared and I was nervous. He was a very, you know, back in those days, a very intimidating, kind of scary person. So I'm in there, and in my panic and stuttering over my words, I just made stuff up that I didn't really do. And I was given, you know, 50 Our Fathers and 30 Hail Marys to do afterwards. And I remember, just from an early age with a lot of stuff, that feeling of utter injustice. Like, I am stuck here another 30 minutes to do this penance for things that I didn't even do. I knew there was something kind of wrong with that, you know, and I eventually, you know, gravitated more towards an evangelical, born again, whatever you want to call it. Some churches, Christian churches, will call themselves non-denominational, whatever the case would be. And I moved to Georgia from Massachusetts in 2007, and that's where I really, really delved in. And I wound up, you know, getting married to a seriously, I mean, stern, sometimes very scary bitter, angry, legalistic man. And I was so enveloped in the church at that time. I didn't see it. I didn't see it. Until this day. I loved my pastors. I loved the people that we did fellowship with, and that's just the way it was. I still to this day consider him a phenomenal Bible teacher in terms of translating some things to me and helping me to understand it. And I dispute nothing in the Bible. I guess what I'm struggling with now in the reconstruction process is what it does do to women and women only with our sexuality. Starting from the time that they were very, very young, our bodies are, simple and dirty, and we are the ones that are responsible for causing the temptation. If especially back in those days, the 60s and 70s, if we were to be raped or molested, somehow we caused that by the way that we dressed or looked or felt. But at the same time, when we married, we were supposed to totally submit and basically do everything that our husbands wanted us to do when he wanted it to do us. And we did. And the idea of getting any pleasure or enjoyment out of it was kind of off the table. I mean, husbands themselves would consider that not Christian-like. I remember being rebuked just like for being in the mood once. So I'm in a reconstruction process, and both fortunately and unfortunately, that all seems to be going on with all this kind of discovering of I am never going to be that Proverbs 31 woman. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, she is hooked up, number one. She is hooked up pretty well. She's got nannies and maids and servants that she takes really good care of. This woman was not a Kardashian. She paid these people. She clothed them. She took care of them. She was the perfect mother. It was because of her that her husband was praised at the city gates. No mention of her, who she was, how she grew up, what she liked, what she didn't like. No mention of sexuality in that, like, whatsoever at all. She mentioned her children. Oh, apparently she must have done that at some point. But I'd always aspired as a Christian, not to literally be like that, of course, but to aspire to be as close to that as possible. The problem with all that is that I do love God, and I am a Christian, and I believe the Bible is the divine written word inspired by God, and every word in there is what's supposed to be in there, despite minor translations or different versions of whatever it may be. But I'm not that. I'm kind of loud. I talk a whole lot. I'm real scrappy, and I'm not a right fighter. I fight for what is right. I literally cannot deal with injustices. Now, that's as a Christian. I feel I have a pretty good discernment of when it's appropriate to just let it go. Let it go. Forgiveness is always appropriate. But is it? See, we don't dare say these things. We don't dare acknowledge that, I can say those words. I'm supposed to say those words. I'm supposed to feel them in my heart. None of the above are true. There are just some people and events that happened in my life. Whether I forgive them or not is irrelevant because I feel the exact same way. Now, I can recall some of those events and I don't have that emotional upheaval or that like post-trauma it once caused. I just choose, I don't want these people in my life, like, ever again. If my children weren't adults, I wouldn't let them around my children. It's just as simple as that. And that feels okay with me. And as I said, getting into the change topic today because of the shooting and the emotions that it stirred up, watching this man who basically, growing up in Massachusetts, his name is household. It was, Trump and Rockefeller, and it was just a household name. Never thought of him like in a political sense. we were what you would call apolitical. Well, let me tell you something. Whether it's a Republican state or a Democratic state, and your parents or your family or whoever is raising you don't talk about politics, you're apolitical in your family. However, you are going to be influenced by however they were raised. Little comments here and there, even if it's no big deal. I don't remember like the presidential elections being a big to do in my house, except anything to do with Kennedy. That was always a huge, huge thing. And it was just apolitical, but something happened that it basically happens when you send your toddler to preschool or kindergarten. And I suppose when you have a toddler like mine who just like didn't eat anything that you made for them, and then they would go off to school and be around all their friends who were eating what you had prepared for them, and all of a sudden they eat at school just fine. It's something called coincidental learning. It's almost a subconscious thing. It's something more of an influence of your peers. I was friends or knew families that were political, that were more involved with that. So I absorbed the Democratic vibe, the liberal vibe of my state, my surroundings, my environment, my atmosphere, my schooling, my family to a degree, even though there wasn't much to do about it. If you had asked me, basic liberal ideas back then, they were just a given. Not that I had ever thought about them or researched anything or read anything or learned anything about it. It was absorbed by coincidental learning. When I became a Christian, from what I can see, there's a stronger leaning, not always, but the majority of Christians kind of lean more towards the conservative side, because in my opinion, there is a higher value system. And somewhere along the line, I guess Democrats just started feeling like we have no room whatsoever, all of us, none of us have any room whatsoever for GBLT, all the things, abortion. I have my own personal opinions on. I like Trump's approach to it in terms of turning it over to the states, but banning, that third term ability unless we have a life or death situation. I'm not supposed to say that as a Christian. I'm not supposed to say it's okay ever, 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 ever. And I'm still struggling with reconstructing that idea, what I really believe, what I really feel. Yes, I'm pro-life. I've seen women use abortion as birth control methods in the past. It's disgusting. But I think I think God makes room for certain circumstances. I've had it happen in my own family, and we've seen and heard, everybody's seen or heard of an infant who died of sudden infant death syndrome. Babies are taken back for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't claim to know all of the mysteries. I do believe that life is viable at the moment of conception. That's where it begins. And I also believe if that conception, is planted in the fallopian tube and could kill the mother and is not going to be viable anyway, save the mother's life. I don't want to get off into some new age tangent, like maybe there was some contract or some deal with God, but God knew that was going to happen. This is the point, guys. I'm not going to be afraid anymore to say what I really feel. And I'm going to get backlash, I already have, about not being a good Christian, turning my back, going against the word of God. I respectfully disagree. This is my life. I've done the very best I could. I never, ever became like the church women that I admired so much, that I wanted to be like so much. My very personality doesn't allow for that. You know, I'm loud, I'm boisterous, I can be opinionated. I cannot stand having the truth or the elephant in the room just sitting there and existing and nobody saying anything about it. I guess that's unladylike and that's Christian. You know, I mean, if you see something ridiculous, and now we're at a point in this country, we are brainwashed into believing we don't even see what we actually really see. For instance, I saw a tweet from former President Obama. This was 2 days, yesterday, I believe, after the shooting. And he's saying we still don't know what happened yet. My personal opinion is Obama is probably one of the most prolific, eloquent speakers, communicators of our time. I could listen to the man for hours. Personal political feelings are irrelevant. He knows how to speak. He knows how to captivate an audience. I had to tweet back, like, wait a minute. Like, I'm a high school graduate with some college and no degree, but I can tell you what happened. It happened in front of my eyes. There was no ifs, ands, there was no gray area. He was assassinated. He was an attempted assassination. There's no gray area. So maybe he's looking into something else, but a lot of the left is kind of going in this crazy direction about other things that could have been. You've got to be kidding. You've got to be kidding. Instantly, I heard my husband yell it from the living room, Obama's been shot. You know, I thought, well, probably a lot of you thought, like, he's dead. He's dead. It had been predicted, myself included, that they're going to try to kill him. And got on the TV immediately. There was still, you know, it was like 911. My only respectful comparison is the chaos of the moment when even the media was trying to figure out what was going on. Like, you know, was there a gas leak and the building blew up? Like, nobody knew. That was legitimate for a few seconds. But within a few minutes, it became apparently and painfully clear as to what had happened. A sniper shot him. And God tilted his head just enough to keep it from going into his brain and nicking his ear. And the look of this man getting up, insisting Secret Service let him speak to us. Fight, fight, fight. Oh, I'm sure I haven't read them yet, but I'm sure there's all kinds of comments out there about his defiance and, you know, and then he's gonna fight us and whoever did this, and let him keep blabbing. It is so over in my mind. It was over before this happened. You know, with all due respect, Dr. Jill Biden, who I just found out is a doctor of education. Nobody in that field with the PhD insists on being called that. Medical professionals, of which one my husband is, and he doesn't ever use the doctor card. I hear his patients call him that, but he doesn't even put his diplomas up in his office. He has a humility about it. She has nothing to do with the medical field, obviously, because she would probably be being like SUED'd at this point for elderly abuse. But the insistence and the arrogance of holding that title when there are fine educators all over the world that also could hold that title and just have the humility not to do it. It was just amazing. And what I'm seeing unfolding in the days afterwards, the aftermath on it, and the horror of what some of the crazy liberals are actually saying. Like one girl screaming on TikTok. I mean, seriously infuriated. How could you get so close? And I'm like getting worked up just thinking about it and picturing those in my mind. But I guess it was to be expected. I mean, if Joe wasn't going to back down after the debate and then went on to call President Zelensky Putin, and to call President, he's my president, Trump, his vice president, and then he called himself, he called Trump, how proud he was to have the first black vice president, Trump, and be the first black president. The interview with Stephanopoulos, everything he did to try to, backwalk the debate made it worse and worse and worse. And last I know, it hasn't been mentioned since the shooting, he's still not backing down. And even if he does at this point, yeah, it's early an election year, polls are, they can change, but I think we're dealing with spiritual powers, both powers and principalities of darkness that are overriding the earth, but God still reigns. And obviously, we are dealing with an anointed man. I watched his whole autobiography today. There was a little arrogance and maybe a little bit here and there with some real estate deals, growing up with his dad. He's learned a lot. And right now, I just see a mighty, humble man of integrity. And I know he took that bullet for me. He took it for you. He said it. He said, they're not coming for me. They're coming for you. And he is the thing that's between them and us. I'm going to sign off for now and kind of regroup because it is very emotional. There's also been personal injustices that have been happening that I want to share a little bit about, but obviously this just took precedence over everything. I just watched and captured that image of him emotionally walking into the RNC with the bandage on his ear. And even we had Sean O'Brien from Massachusetts. Massachusetts is probably somewhere equivalent to California for being liberal and leftist. Luckily, my ex-husband and I just really didn't have strong views on that with our oldest son, the one that's the millennial. And even my Gen Zer, he graduated and went on to college before, matter of fact, COVID hit when he was in college. So it just wasn't as bad. It wasn't as bad in the schools as it is now. They don't have any recollection of all this propaganda and ideology and all these debates on restrooms, that they just didn't have to deal with it, thank God. And the only problem there is that they're very kind of neutral. I'm seeing 3 different personality types in Gen Z, more so in Gen Z than millennials, that I also want to get into in another video. But in the meantime, I would ask, no matter what you think or who you believe in, a man's life was attempted to be taken, a president to be an innocent bystander, and I think there was 1 or 2 others that were seriously wounded. So you got to be some kind of dirtbag, seriously. Like, if you think that's cool, or you're frustrated that they missed, no regard. Here's my personal prayer for you, Mr. Trump, that God keep his hand on you at all times, that he blesses you from the top of your head to the soles of your feet, that he gives you the knowledge and the wisdom to continue to move forward, that he protects you, that he protects your family, that he sees you and walks with you and stays with you and he's your advisor when you get back into the White House, when you get back home to Pennsylvania Avenue, where you belong, with Melania, with Barron, and the rest of your beautiful family. You're not who anybody might have thought you were 20, 30 years ago when I was growing up as a young girl. May he bless you and keep you all the days of his life. Amen.